Welcome to what month is this? October, our October Health and Safety Committee meeting, October the 28th. We have been away for a while, and so it's great to see everybody back again. I'm going to do introductions of those that are sitting around the table, starting with myself, and then we'll move to my left, go back around, and then back with me, and then we're just gonna hit it. So I am Dr. Bonfit, board member and committee chair.
Oh, I thought you were going to do the great
No,
introductions.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Mary Weinberg,
Vice President Weinberg.
also known as VP Weinberg.
Told you this is the fun committee.
I'm Christopher Brennan, Chief Operating Officer.
Hi, Linda Gallagher, Vice President of Mental Health and Addiction Services with the Hamilton County Mental Health and Recovery Services Board.
Lenora Godfrey, President, CEO at the Hamilton County Mental Health and Recovery Services Board.
Dr. Smith, Interim Deputy Superintendent.
Shauna Murphy, Interim Superintendent.
Kendra Mack, board member. So Steve got the fun part of CPS right now. And so we've got some continuation, but we've also got some great new information and presentations on behalf of our work plan that we have. And let's just dive right into it. We have it all under agenda, but this is our new business. We're going to have a really brief but engaging presentation around mental health for our young people. But before that, I forgot our two very important people in the audience. One of them keeps the board together. The other one keeps the community together with regard to engagement. So let them introduce themselves, and then Rob will give some instructions if you are online or you happen to be amongst our vast studio audience and you want to speak at the meeting. Ms. Phyllis?
I am Phyllis Davis, the board's administrative assistant.
Rob Wilson, technician. And if you'd like to speak during the speaking of the public section, please click the hand icon. When you raise it, we will ask you your name and association to the district, and then at the end of the meeting, we will invite you in to speak during the speaking of the public section. Thank you.
All right, let's get to it. So let's begin. We are going to have a wonderful presentation. Hamilton County Mental Health and Recovery Services Board, Mrs. Godfrey, and guest. So let's get started.
Wonderful. First, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come here and present on behalf of the Hamilton County Mental Health and Recovery Services Board. So in front of you, you have a resource guide, which we put out probably once a year because there's so many changes in the community. On the back side of it, you'll see a QR code. So this helps us to stay most updated. Sometimes once we put the book out, an address changes. So you can scan this on your phone and download the most current version of the guide. You also have in front of us, a couple weeks ago, September 20th, had our annual meeting, and this is our annual report from 2023. So I just wanted to share that with you at your leisure. Review it. If you have any questions, you can contact our board, but we can go ahead and get into the presentation. So at the Hamilton County Mental Health and Recovery Services Board, we believe recovery benefits the entire community and treatment works. Next slide. To give you a little information about the board, we, under the Ohio Revised Code 340, are the statutory behavioral health care lead for Hamilton County. We plan, we fund, manage, and evaluate behavioral health services for county residents. We provide a coordinated system of community care, which is cost-effective. We want to produce better outcomes and meet the needs and preferences of the community. And how do we do that? Next slide. We are funded through state and federal revenue from the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. We also have local revenue. We're funded through the voters have approved a mental health levy locally, family and service treatment levy, which is on the ballot up for renewal in November, and the indigent care levy. So those are our funding sources. We are not able to provide direct service. We are an administrative board, so we contract with 38 mental health and addiction services providers. The next slide. It's a wide range of mental health and SUD services that they provide, and all agencies are required to be certified by the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. We serve about 30,500 people, and when you look at our annual report, you'll see the vast array of services that these providers offer, from mobile crisis to prevention to inpatient treatment to community-based treatment. And we serve, like I said, about 30,500 people annually. Next slide. So you may ask what our goals are. We want to provide a system of care with a wide array of evidence-based treatment services. Those evidence-based treatment services may be trauma-informed, CBT, just an array of evidence-based. We promote prevention and education efforts that reduce the impact of mental illness and addiction in the community. And those are, what you'll hear, some of what we fund are school-based services. We also have prevention services that assist families. We assist training of educators, administrators. We ensure individuals with behavioral health and substance use disorder needs are treated in an environment that best meets their needs. There are inpatient services, but we believe in the community-based services. Sometimes the level of care is needed where someone is in residential treatment, but as they go through the treatment and they improve and they're coming back into the community, we have community-based treatment that wraps services around them, because that's the best place for people to be in their natural environment. We also ensure financial viability of the board and its service delivery system through efficient, accountable, and responsible financial management. Next slide. So some of the services that I believe are you're probably most interested in is how we serve the youth in the community. We have school-based services, which are either prevention or treatment. Some of those services that Linda can go into a little bit more detail about those type of services, but we also fund urgent care for families. Much like the urgent care for medical services, we have an urgent care for behavioral health, which is at Best Point. Funding support for crisis services. We have a mobile crisis response, which is 24/7. It serves families, children, and adults. We have crisis follow-up in the community. If you're familiar with Talbert House, the 988 and 911 line. We have a 281 care where you can call at any time if you just need support, need to talk to somebody, or if you need emergent care. Unfortunately, when we have a traumatic event in the community, we have follow-up care where they dispense clinicians into the community to assist. When we had the shooting at Fifth Third, we were able to talk with folks in the businesses that were not ultimately impacted, but they were surrounding there. So fear of what might happen the next day when I go to work. So we have community services that will go follow up on crises. We have housing supports, not only placing people in housing, but wrapping supportive services around them, whether it's employment, vocational employment services, or housing supports to make sure there's food in the home. Electricity is on, subsidies are paid, where they're assisting those who may not have income to afford a one-bedroom apartment. We might subsidize their housing. Suicide prevention. You may be as I said, the 988 line is a national line, but it's manned locally, and we took over 45,000 calls over the last year. Journey to Successful Living, a transition age youth program. We have two very large events throughout the year. Ask Me Who I Am conference, which looks and utilizes the youth voice to understand what are the needs of our youth in the community. They put the conference on. They decide who's gonna speak and what they're gonna speak about for what they're dealing with through that year. We also have Independent City, which is an event that's been highly attended by 300 youth in the school systems throughout Hamilton County, and it serves to train them on what is it like to live independently? And so they have, it's like a simulated event. So they go around and they'll go and they'll receive a job. They may, or they receive a card that says you're either employed or you're in school, you own your, or you maybe not own a home, but you're in an apartment, and how do you pay the rent? You can choose to go out, or you can choose to party, or you can choose to pay your rent. So it's just a simulation to help our youth understand as they transition through youth into adulthood, what are some of these responsibilities? Next slide. So as I said, we have the resource guide, and we make this available, and we really want to disseminate the community with this. You know, sometimes we have a hard guide and things change like on an ongoing basis, as I said. We have made it available by QR code because the most important thing that we think is priority is to get this information out to as many people and keep it as current as possible. Because when the need arises, we want the information to be available to folks. That is my presentation. Any questions or any additional information?
Well, you promised to keep it brief, and you did just that. I will ask you, the reason why this is important and one of the reasons why it's on our list of topics is because we have partnered as Cincinnati Public with the Hamilton County Addiction Response Coalition, of which you remember, and now we are as well. And if you could, because this is my very first time sitting on this committee, this is our very first time being involved. And so I'm not as fully versed as I would like to be around talking about what the ARC does. And could you give a little bit of context around what that coalition does, and then how you all fit in that, and then there was a need for and a request for Cincinnati Public to join them as well,
Yes.
if you don't mind.
So, and Linda was on the ARC
Yes.
before I was. Actually, boy, I don't know, it's been some years, maybe about 8 years. The overdoses from opioid drugs started skyrocketing in Hamilton County. And the gentleman who was in the president CEO seat before me got with, I guess it was wasn't Commissioner Driehaus, but the commissioners at the time, to try to address the issues in Hamilton County. And so they developed a coalition, because quite often when you deal with large issues like this, it's more prudent to become a coalition and work at the issue together. So they identified you have a lot of people who work on an issue independently, but to come together and address the issue collectively was the goal of the coalition. In most recent time, the board was one of the initial people at the seat, and looked and pulled in law enforcement, and we pulled in other parties who were being impacted by what was going on in the community. Most recently, the schools were identified because it's just another community that we can get information in. That coalition has grown. We have peers that sit on and make decisions, make policy decisions. There's funding that flows through those boards, and we identify collectively where the funding can go to make the biggest impact. So it's not only treatment, but there's peer services that are purchased and paid for with the funding. There's also prevention.
Ms. Linda, did you want to add
some
anything?
treatment.
Would you like to add anything, since you're this historian for?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, we call them pillars. Those are the pillars that make up the coalition. Started with the treatment pillar, the prevention pillar. We called it interdiction pillar, as well as public health. And these were certainly chaired by executive directors and noted stakeholders in our community to address the opioid problem. Actually, when the ARC started, it was actually called the Heroin Task Force back in the day. But recognizing that it's really not just a heroin problem in our community, it really is an addiction problem in our community. And how do you address all of that? And so over the years, as Lenora was saying, building upon that coalition and seeing the impact that we've been able to have in our community. During COVID, we really came together with public health, putting out awareness emergencies that, there's been 10 people who have died of an overdose in our community just within the last 2 weeks. And what we've learned is that people really started paying attention to this and getting this kind of information out and building networks of education and prevention and opportunities to have a direct impact with all of these pillars working together. It wasn't always like that. Individuals who suffered from addiction problems had a terrible relationship with criminal justice individuals. But our criminal justice partners recognized they cannot arrest their way or incarcerate their way out of this problem. And so forming the task force and now ARC has really been just a wonderful boon of collaboration and success for our community.
And it really has been informative. And I will share that this is the very first year, not even a year, that Cincinnati Public has been included. And part of the energy behind the commissioner's request to have Cincinnati Public at the table was because they wanted to get more information around youth regarding prevention and education and awareness. So I've done a lot of listening at the table, and their Prevention First did a study of youth in Hamilton County that was robust, and they had wanted to get into Cincinnati Public when they were conducting the study, I think right after COVID. And the intention is to work with administration to be at the table for the next iteration of the study. But young people had a very vast experience around substance abuse and their interpretation of good and bad substances and their exposure, quite frankly. And so we're planning on doing a lot more work. I thought it would be appropriate to have this come through the Health and Safety Committee. And it's always a pleasure to get some information from you all to have our administration find out where we could partner and plug in and utilize your services, even if it is, again, for education. I'm going to invite my colleagues to ask any questions that they have, and then administration. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Board Member Matt.
So thank you for the presentation. I am excited to hear about all of the services that you extend, not only to just the community, but also in the schools. And I'm interested in knowing, can you share some of the direct impact that you all are aware of as it relates to students receiving services through prevention methods or through treatment, and how that has directly impacted them academically?
Sure. So Dr.
Sorry.
Yes, no.
Little
You know
sidebar
what?
here.
No. Yeah.
Which one should we pick?
I think Linda can talk about the treatment or prevention in the schools. And I would like to mention, as Dr. Moffitt mentioned, the survey through Prevention First, the drug survey of kids. And so that information could, what that's told us was these kids are vaping and chroming, and they're doing things to try to test. And so when they go into the schools, they're educating the kids, not only learning what's going on or learning what they have access to, but they're also educating them. They most recently this year opened up the survey because we know with COVID, isolation came. And so they started asking about the kids' mental illness. Do they have somebody that in the schools that they are comfortable sharing how they feel with? And so you're learning more of what these kids in their environment are dealing with. And so I think that that's a wonderful way of learning what's going on in some of the schools in a small facet, but it tells us what type of programming we can assist with. And I think Linda can tell you a little bit more about the prevention, school-based prevention services.
Just hearing from individuals who have had the services with several of our agencies, UMADOP comes to mind. One of the schools that they're in, I think it's Rothenburg.
Yes.
Just how grateful, and they had a brief video of some of the students that they've been working with, who just talked, young men who very clearly are not used to being on video, but were able to talk so sincerely about that connection, that engagement, and really just feeling that someone is there for them. How important is that, to be able to know that when you go to school, there's somebody that you can talk to? And that's and it's not just UMADOP, that's the feedback that we're getting of so many of these support kinds of services that are in these schools. You know, we've got the prevention, building resiliency. How important is that for these youth? And building those protective factors. But at the same time, there's food insecurity, and all those other social determinants of health that impact that student walking in the door. To have trained counselors, trauma-informed individuals, family peer support for those parents out there who are walking through this too. Those are the stories that we hear back about. Thank goodness that you're there, because, and certainly just the feedback from the teachers that we've had. They feel overwhelmed. They're trying to teach I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but that's what we hear. Just the gratefulness and observation of this youth is able to come to school and get their needs met and learn at the same time.
Absolutely, thank you. Vice President Weinberg?
Yes, you took a couple of my questions. Thank you, Board Member Mapp, but thank you so much for coming and presenting this information to us. I'm just going to go a little bit off of the question that Board Member Mapp asked in terms of the number of students that are receiving and the impact. So I know that you're giving the stories of how some of the teachers are very thankful, some of the families. Do you find that some of the services are utilized more in our elementary versus our high schools, or is there kind of a number that you can say there have been 200 families or 200 students that have been helped? And I think for me, I'm just curious too, do you have any resources going to our Project Connect as well?
So I think we have in our annual report about 120,000 prevention services across the span. So that's administration that may have been trained, that's kids that may have received school-based services, education of families of what's available. So, it's a broad array of touch. Project Connect.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question.
Ms.
next.
Godfrey, are you familiar with Project Connect? Are you familiar with Project Connect?
Somewhat.
So it's our program, and let me defer to Superintendent Murphy. Let me defer. Go ahead.
Sure, thank you. So Project Connect is our programming for our students and families experiencing homelessness. So the children are in all of our schools. So Rebecca Beach is the manager of that program. So wondering if that's a familiar name to you.
I just saw a clip that she had
Yeah.
and was educating on Project Connect. and that's what I thought it was. So we have PATH teams that are, PATH is the Project to End Homelessness, or
It's called
it sounds for
Path
something.
Teams.
Yes, PATH, PATH, and what does it stand for, Linda? I know, it's another acronym.
Pathways.
Right.
Pathways, yes, of transition from homelessness, I think it is.
That's it.
And so, I don't know if it's directly connected, but those are teams that will go out and identify either homeless camps, and they'll establish a relationship, because quite often we'll find that folks don't necessarily want to come in. And so it's developing that trust and that relationship so that they can, we have, like we said, housing supports, we have treatment. So we're identifying, these teams will just comb in communities where they've either been informed or they're aware of camps being set up. We also work with 3CDC in the business district, kind of in the downtown area, and have some specialized outreach programs. Now, it might be specific to mental health, but we also identify families that are homeless. So there's teams within our funding that will identify, and I'm not sure if they're specifically connecting with Project Connect, but we're providing similar services.
And we want to find out. We want to connect with Project Connect.
And I was just going to say that I think the reason why I then asked that question was to see if there could be some type of connection, because when you have the great things going on in the community that you all are doing, and then we have this entity here within the district working together, we can definitely help our families. So,
Right,
thank you.
Yes.
And also, just so you know, we fund directly about a dozen different agencies that are providing services in almost 100 Cincinnati public schools. So today, I do not have a number of students being touched by those services, but it's pervasive.
Great. Well, I think we're going to make sure that all of the board members get your your information today from this meeting. And then we're going to also ensure that you're connected with administration. You got 3 really great administrators here and the superintendent. So this is like utopia. And we want to, Project Connect is just near and dear to me, not from personal experience, but I just know that some of our families are really struggling, but they come to school all the time. And it's just, and they're working homeless families. So they work every day. And so that's just an area I really would like to make some connections to. So I know Superintendent Murphy will do that. Thank you so much for presenting.
Thank you. Thank you.
And next up on our agenda, did anyone else have any other questions? Superintendent Murphy? Mr. Burkhart? Dr. Smith? All right. I know they're probably nervous, like, uh-oh, she's coming to me. She's coming to me. So next on our agenda, Mr. Burkhart, it is you talking about pedestrian safety. You ladies are welcome to stay. It will not offend us at all if you decide that you don't want to, but you are welcome to stay with us.
Okay.
Yeah, what's on you, Mr. Burkhart?
Excellent. So thank you. We've done a lot of work on pedestrian safety over the past couple of months. So just give you some updates on some conversations we've had with the city and with Metro, as well as some work that we've done internally. So a couple of buckets there. So as we start and look at, let's start with crossing guards, first of all. So from a crossing guard standpoint, this coming Friday, November 1st, is the day that we actually, CPS takes over the hiring of crossing guards. And that was discussed with the city back in, I'm going to say, early to mid-August, if I'm not mistaken. I hope the superintendent keeps me honest with those dates. Currently, there are 168 crossing guards within the city. Of those, 5 are non-public locations. So all but 5 are CPS school locations. We currently have 99 filled positions, and there are currently 69 vacancies. So up until now, the process was the city was hiring crossing guards. When we, back in August, when we realized that we were going to start taking them over, we actually put on our website and started the outreach to fill those positions, but we were taking that information and then giving it to the city. Starting this Friday, we are taking that over ourselves. So we do have, I believe, 16 or 17 applications that on Friday will start interviewing and hiring. So we hope that that's about a 3-week process to get through that entire process, from doing the interview to background checks to onboarding to having folks actually standing in a intersection with the crossing guard sign. So we're very hopeful that that's going to continue and that we're going to make that a seamless process. Again, we're standing this up from scratch, so we've got a couple of speed bumps, pun intended, in that we have to get over. But after that, I think we're going to be able to make this a seamless process. And when we do have vacancies, be able to get folks in there rather quickly, because we're going to control it ourselves versus relying on a second or third party to do that. So that's the crossing guard information right now. There's a lot more back work that we're doing on that, like putting uniforms together for them, getting the signs together, getting the training together. So there's a lot of back end work that's going on that isn't that sexy thing that a lot of folks want to hear about, but there is a lot of work going on that at some other time I'd be happy to talk to the committee about and go into great detail about. As far as crossing areas and crosswalks, we have a number of areas that we have been working on over the past couple of months. I want to take a second and say the Office of Transportation Engineering with the city under John Brzezina has been great to work with at every step along the way. Every time we've asked, if we can go out and meet at a location, it was always, yes, let's do it. I will also say on the Metro side as well, because this also ties into Metro too, with bus stops. The group has really come together to be results-oriented. So I want to give a public shout out to them that this has been a great process. So there's a number of schools, and I'll read through some of them. Clark High School, we looked at the crosswalks there. South Avondale, there were 3 areas of concern that we looked at. Walnut, there were multiple areas of Walnut that we looked at, both in the morning at arrival and a separate location at dismissal, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. We looked at Schroeder Middle School and the crosswalk now that has become a middle school and having Metro service there. And also Hyde Park was the last one that we are working on. So from a number of those, we're looking at what is currently in place, and a lot of these are spurred from questions or conversations that folks have had with us saying, hey, we don't think that this is a safe intersection, or we don't think this is a safe crosswalk, or hey, we need additional crosswalk here. And so we look at those as a team to go out. We have been in conversation with the principals and done walkthroughs with principals, and in some cases, we have the person who is saying this is unsafe to be there with us to point out something that we may or may not have seen. Metro is out there with us as well as folks from the Transportation Engineering Office. So we've looked at Clark, we've looked at South Avondale. Walnut specifically, there's a situation in which the location for the metro station or metro stop in the morning, where students come off the metro, there's a sidewalk that runs up to the school, but it's on the south side of where the metro stop is. So students actually have to cross the driveway to get up to the school. The sidewalk on the right-hand side, that would be the normal entrance up to the school, the sidewalk only goes halfway. So we have a dilemma here. Either we build the sidewalk the other 300 to 400 yards up to the school, or we try to find a crosswalk area. We actually had Metro looking at, and the city actually looking at, can we move that bus stop down? And we, after doing some studies with that, would not allow the bus to then get into the left lane to be able to turn left out of that location. So we are exhausting other possibilities. One is, do we make the morning drop-off the same as the afternoon pickup? and where we do have the ability to have students exit off of Metro right onto the campus. So we don't have a solution to that yet, but we've had no less than 5 meetings about it, trying to find, hey, here's an option, or here's a solution, and let's kick that around, and then we find out maybe that isn't the best one, so we'll come up with another one. So I don't have any resolution to that right now, but we did in the afternoon look at putting a crosswalk in on Jonathan, so that those folks who are parked on the other side of the street, where students have to walk across the street, as well as we noticed that the traffic was way too high for that, the speed limit, or the speed of the traffic was way too high for that area. So we're gonna look at how do we slow down traffic, whether that's lights, whether that's speed bumps, whether that's restricting and adding more parking on to those sides, which will stop traffic from speeding down those areas. So we've got that. Bramble was a school that we started last year, but the city was not aware that that was a school that was growing in population. So we're talking about how do we put crosswalks and those types of entrance to the school so that we can be more safe along those streets. And then obviously Schroeder Middle School. I will say Schroeder Middle School is delayed because of me. I was out of the office last week, and we were supposed to meet there and designate exactly where that crosswalk was going to be. So that one's on me, and hopefully next week we can get a meeting reset for that specific one. We also have put out an audit to all the principals to say, we know where all the crosswalks currently are. Do you like them? Do you think there should be more or less based on what you are seeing those traffic patterns to be? So we just got that information back. I believe there were 8 principals who didn't respond, so we're following up to get that information. And that's what's going to start our audit process. So that's our first step of the audit, where we're going to have boots on the ground at each one of those crosswalks to see, do we have all the resources we need in each one of those areas where students are crossing? Obviously, we know we don't have an endless supply of money, but how do we take the resources that we currently have and make them as robust as humanly possible? So that's another piece. The last that I want to talk about briefly is the high school lighting. So we don't have flashing lights at all of our high schools. The city is going to phase those in over a number of years, and our next meeting is going to be discussing what those priorities are that are set by the city, and then having that conversation. For example, Walnut is one of those that came to the top of the list to say, where is Walnut on the list? Where can we move them up on the list to move that up so that we can get that permitting and those areas taken care of sooner rather than later? So that's, in short, that's a lot of the work that we've been doing.
Well, we definitely, I appreciate your efforts, and you definitely get a pass and a hug from last week, so for sure. I'm going to defer to my colleagues, who I know are going to ask my questions. That's the only bad thing about chairing, is that you get to go last, and I know they're going to ask my questions, so go ahead, Vice President Weinberg.
Thank you for starting with me.
We kind of,
I
we think
appreciate
alike, so I
that.
know it's coming for you.
Mr. Burkhart, thank you so much. You actually had me sitting here crossing out the names because I made a list of all the schools. I want to thank you so much. Pedestrian safety is very important and very key for our students.
How many on the list did I miss?
Actually, none.
Okay.
Because we also talked about this a couple years ago as well. So it's great to see that you're following back up. I love hearing that you're looking at all of the schools. You're trying to connect with the principals as well. I know when we did school visits, we were able to get some of that information, and we were able to see, hey, what's going on? I'm not going to talk about a particular school, but I am happy to hear that I experience every single morning where I am trying not to hit our young people. And I'm happy to hear that you're going to be looking into that, because it is a huge concern, especially as the bus is dropping those kids off and things of that nature, and especially at dismissal. So I want to thank you for that. And there was something that I wrote down that I wanted to ask about. Oh, yes. So a parent reached out to me, and it's a Hyde Park parent, and they were just saying that they're just very concerned. And I'm going to say that Hyde Park has been a very, very how should I say? I wouldn't say high risk, but I know that it's been complained about. And I'm happy to hear that you all are looking into that because, you know, when the kids are crossing over and you have individuals who don't seem to care about the speed limit and you even have the crossing guard trying to say, slow down. And last year, one of the Hyde Park students, they actually won the contest for the pedestrian city contest. So to be able to have those schools on the list and to really ensure that you guys are working hard, I just want to thank you for your efforts on that. And I look forward to seeing some updates. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board Member Matt.
Yeah, so I really don't have any questions because you just did such a thorough job, right, of providing all of the information. I really like the survey idea. I think that really gets it just shows the intentionality around trying to figure out where those challenging areas are. I guess the only thing that I would add to that is I'm wondering if it would be too much to maybe extend that to like students or families to, because they may have a different experience of how they are dealing with like the crosswalks and things of that sort. But I just love the fact that you're engaging and trying to get feedback from, all of the families within our district and our principals. And then also just to hear the collaborative work that's happening with the city as well as Metro. I thought that was a really great process. And so thank you for sharing.
So I won't be redundant except for in saying thank you, but I do have a couple questions that I'm surprised that they didn't ask, but I know that they were probably waiting on me to ask. So with regard to November 1st being the date that now we have to do this, I had an opportunity to speak with our vice mayor who asked me, was the training of the crossing guards going to be continued by the city? And I said, I don't know. We were going to be talking about that today.
Yes.
And she shared to let her know because it was her understanding that the city was still going to train those crossing guards. And so my question is around what was the city's turnaround time? You mentioned 3 weeks. It seems like a very long time to me to get a crossing guard. I mean, I know the process doesn't have to take long for background checks, but if I need a crossing guard October 1st, I'd hate for it to be November 1st, and I'm still waiting. So is there any way that we can get the training from the city, the uniforms from the city, the equipment from the city, all of that to streamline the process? And again, I think we need to, what's their turnaround time, but we need to also have this conversation at the joint city CPS meeting as well, because I think it needs to be publicly stated that we've always paid for crossing guards. So that is something that people don't quite realize. We paid for them, we funded them, but they've hired them, which is a little different. But now we're going to take all of that on, which is an additional cost to us in department personnel, et cetera. But is there any possible way that we can maybe streamline that down to a person who has no problems on their background check, maybe a week or 2 weeks, but what's their turnaround?
Exactly. And then when I said that 3 week, that again, this is the first time that we're going through the crossing guards. So we don't know what we don't know in relation to, and I'm talking about from the time that we have an application on file till the time that they're actually starting their process. So within that is not only background checking, going through the application process, onboarding, which is the training, and getting the uniforms and getting them into place. Right now, I think we can shrink that significantly moving forward. But the first, I'm going to say, onboarding of these first 16 may take a little bit longer than any of us are happy with.
I got you, just because it's new to us, not necessarily going to be the process standard, but it's just new.
And I'm being a little bit cautious without saying, I would love it to be 2 weeks, and that's the conversations that we've had with our team is how do we get this done within 2 weeks? But we're not there yet.
Got it. The high school lighting piece, I think that's great that the cities recognize that this is something that they're going to phase in. Are there any schools that are of immediate concern? I appreciate the fact that Walnut wants to be bumped in the list, but what are some of the schools that have an immediate need? Do you know?
Yeah, so Clark is one of those that we've talked about extensively as well, that, and so just to level set, none of our high schools have those lighting that the elementaries do. And so this is something that we're standing up. I mean, I would look at Woodward as another example of a very high-traffic area
Yeah.
that students may have to cross, where it just helps for visibility standpoint when you're looking at Reading Road. So Clark, Walnut, and Woodward are probably the three that come top to mind. But I think that there's obviously a need for all of them to have it. It's just trying to prioritize which ones are higher than the others, and that's almost impossible to do because they all need it, and they all need it, sooner rather than later.
I would imagine, especially around major highways like Madison, I don't know if Madison's a major route, US route, but like Reading Road is. And when we're talking about lighting, are we talking about, I want to understand, are we talking about when you press the button, the sign lights up, or like, what are we talking about with
So we're
regard to
talking
lighting?
about the flashing lights that say that there's a school zone and with the speed limits, so.
Okay.
And that doesn't happen we currently don't have them at our high schools right now, we just have them at our elementaries.
One more question before Vice
Yes.
President Weinberg gets in here. Is there any state statute limitations? So for instance, you mentioned that they're at our elementary schools. Is it because there's an Ohio Revised Code that says they have to be at elementary schools but not high schools, and so we're asking for something optional? Or is it saying that they need to be at all schools and high schools, we're just not done?
No, so the city and the Office of Transportation and Engineering is in charge of that. That's not something that the school district does. They have only focused on elementary. I don't know if there's a statute or not.
Okay.
That, just because it's not in my realm.
Sure.
But we can find out from them, what their priority has been in the past, and why it's been elementaries and not high schools. I just don't know that answer.
Well, that's a good way to use some leverage. So, I'm looking for all kinds of ways to be like, hey, can you expedite this? So, thank you, Vice President Weinberg.
Yes, so just in regards to the elementary schools, do we know if they are at all of the elementary schools? Is it possible to just kind of check that as they're looking into the high schools, just to make sure?
Yeah,
Because
so
I'm not
that's-
aware of ever seeing a sign that lights up.
So
But maybe I
that's-
just haven't looked for it.
So that's part of our audit that we're actually going to be able to survey and say, what is at each one of our schools? Because some of our schools have speed bumps and some of them do not. Some of them have, multiple signs, some of them do not. Some of them have, neighborhoods, kids playing signs near the schools because they're close to playgrounds. Some do not. So we would like those all to be standardized so that we are doing the same thing at each one of our schools so that we can say we're doing everything from a safety standpoint that we possibly can.
Absolutely. Thank you,
but-
Mr. Burkhart.
And so we're also working with the city as we come up, as we get a concern, we reach out, and so we're meeting with the city every other week right now to touch base on any concerns that come in, either from their side or from ours, in dealing with school safety. I lump transportation together with safe routes to school, with pedestrian safety, so that all kind of happens together in that Venn diagram. So none of that happens in a vacuum. So we're talking about all of those things together, as well as Metro's side of that happens within the bubble as well.
Absolutely.
And I
Well,
think
thank
this
you.
is also
Yes, ma'am.
some of the work that Councilman Albee was doing around looking at why people were driving so fast through school zones and talking about ticketing people. And initially, when we met with her, I was saying, I think we need to make sure everything that's supposed to be at a school is present at a school before we say we want to look at ticketing people or having that conversation, because I know those flashing lights aren't at every school. I know there is 20 miles per hour at every school flashing. So if we're going to hold people accountable, we got to make sure that we've done exactly what Chris is talking about. So I think that's part of the route that they're going back and saying, are these things present? So that's part of that work as well.
Thank you for sharing that. Board Member Matt?
Yes, thank you. So I recently was just speaking with Interim Superintendent Murphy about we have had challenges, obviously, with some students most recently being injured. And so I'm wondering, has there been an audit, after those incidents have occurred to identify if those are, high-risk areas, or if there's anything that we need to do on our end, just to ensure that additional level of safety is there?
Yeah, taking on this level of work just as recently as August, it's actually refreshing to know that there's a lot of data to support the decisions that are made at the city level, knowing what the speed limit is and what the average rate of speed is for those individuals. Jokingly, I had a conversation with someone at the city, and they actually had the speed guns. And I said, well, can I take those out to the school to see what the actual speed of the traffic is outside of the schools instead of just guessing on what they were? So there is a lot of data that goes behind not only looking at it from day to day, but also when there is an incident. I know there was a student who was struck not too long ago, and there was a lot of data that they were able to supply in relation to that. So not as good that it happened, but good that we are getting actual data, not just, yeah, it's horrible that it happened, but why and what can we do in the future? Sure.
All right, so thank you. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to ask you to come back to the joint city CPS meeting because you've got such an important topic that I think we need to keep it at the forefront of the city's mind. And as long as they're listening, we'll give them the kudos first, and then we'll tell them what we need. So it's like a 1-2 punch. Our last topic on the agenda is in regards to community learning centers. I'm going to let Superintendent Murphy take over that.
Thank you. There, in particular, was an incident at a Little League football game a few weeks ago. You want me to, in particular, talk about that and where we are?
More specifically, just a brief overview of what community learning centers are, what the difference is between an event that is an extension of the school versus an event that is being utilized by our buildings. It doesn't necessarily have to be specific.
So all of our schoolhouses are community learning centers. And so with those, we have a variety of partners who we do allow to have space in our buildings during the school day, after the school day. The benefit to them are several things. One, little to probably no overhead for the work that they do, the ability to have direct access to children, and the ability to talk with teachers, staff, personnel at any given moment in order to have stronger collaboration. In that sense, there usually is a memorandum of understanding that we have in place between the lead agency, the LSDMC, and whatever that partner may be. In addition to that, as community learning centers, we have the buildings open and available for rentals. The rentals range anywhere from private ceremonies, homegoing ceremonies, graduations that are not connected to Cincinnati Public Schools, and the use of our fields and courts. So in that case, what happens is a partner will go online to the district's website and go to Building Facility Usage tab, fill out an application. That application comes to the central office. It is reviewed, and then the person may choose 2 or 3 schools, maybe one that they are particularly interested in, and then we send those applications to the schools for their review and to check to see if there's availability for those fields, the courts, the auditorium, smaller classrooms, et cetera. And then once that's approved, there are steps that we ask people to take, from having insurance for their particular event. We will ask them about safety and security. We will ask them to pay for custodial services. Some of our buildings, some of our auditoriums, there may be a fee, and there may not be a fee, depending on what the particular event is. And so that is always available to the public, and I think the process works fairly smoothly. Mr. Burkhart, being in charge of our facilities, may also want to share any thoughts he may have on this subject.
So I'm going to say this was on our work plan for the month of October, and it just so happened to have come up in discussion with the community around needing clarity. So that's why we brought this up. This is timely. We also, I want to point out, we also have churches that utilize our facilities as well. So it could very well be that there's no charge because it's a church. It could very well be that it's someone wanting to throw an event for the community. It could be community council meetings or meeting there because there's something else going on. So our buildings, Cincinnati Public has been known now internationally for the Community Learning Center model for some time now, probably before me, but definitely for decades. And that is also inclusive of the medical centers and the dental center, the dental clinics that are in our buildings as well. We also have an opportunity for our students to get vision screenings and hearing screenings in our buildings under the Community Learning Center model as well. And so, do board members have any questions things that they would like clarified? Yes, ma'am.
So given the fact that all of our schools are under the Community Learning Center model, if someone is looking to host an event, but it is a large-scale event, so there's hundreds of people, say for instance, there's a competition, is that a deterrent for being able to access or use the schools since there's several people that are maybe coming in and out of the buildings, or is it, I guess, like an equitable process across the board?
I can't think of any that we have turned down, whether it is a private entity's cheer clinic or a basketball tournament that is not ran by Cincinnati Public Schools, but by another entity. We have had those. We have had different communities want to do ceremonies and services, job fairs in our buildings, and we have allowed that to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I do not have a question. My question was answered on Saturday at the work session, so I will not bring it back up again.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Burkhart.
Yeah, so to follow up on Superintendent Murphy's great explanation of how this happens, over the last couple of decades, this has always been a paper process. So folks have either reached out via email or filled out a paper application for this to happen. It gets routed to facilities and to the school, first of all, to make sure the space is available. And then if they need anything else, it gets routed to each one of those departments. As you can imagine, being paper or electronic via email, it was a long process to fill out. So we would go to food service and say, okay, they would like to use the kitchen, and then get approval there. And then we would say safety and security, they need safety and security, and then we would make sure that they're on board. But so I'm getting a little ahead of my skis here, but we are rolling out, this has been a year-long process. You're hearing it here first. We are rolling out a software that it will be a one-stop shop from the time that they put the application in. It will automatically get routed to the school for approval of the space, and then it will automatically, if that answer is yes, get routed to every single area that they need to touch through that, so that everyone can work simultaneously. The best part of all this is it will also be set up to integrate with our heat HVAC systems and our door locks, so that on an automatic timer, we have those either heating or cooling of the building an hour before the event starts, and then the doors automatically will unlock at the right time, so that there's no ambiguity there. We know it's going to happen. In the past, it was always manual, so we were relying on an individual to remember that on Saturday, they had an 8 o'clock event, and they had to get there at 7 to make sure the building was heated or cooled appropriately, make sure the front doors are unlocked, an hour before the event, so that folks can come in and set up. And all that is going to be automated now too, which we are very, very happy for. So sometime with the next month or so, we're going to roll that out. It's been a year because we've actually had to put every single room in our district into our database.
Wow.
So with that, it's not only the room, but the dimensions. How many students can it hold with desks? Pictures of our gymnasium, pictures of our cafeteria. So anyone from the outside who wants to say, hey, I want a gymnasium, but I don't know which one, can actually look at photos of the gymnasium and say, hey, this is what I would like to utilize. All the billing will be all automated, so if they do have a credit card, they can pay for it right then and there, and have all that automated as well, and then that money gets funneled through to the appropriate accounts. So we're really excited about the work that's been going on for almost a year now to get this up and going.
Good. Well, thank you so much. This is great news. And in true health and safety fashion, not only are we the fun committee, we are the informative committee because this was rolled out here first. I love it. I love it. I love it. Board members, do you have any other business that you'd like to talk about or that you'd like to bring up for the administration to work on at our last meeting? No? Okay. Rob, do we have anyone online that wants to speak? All right. So our next meeting, Ms. Phyllis, when is that? December the 9th, just in time for Christmas. So we will see each other again on December the 9th. Same bat time, 3 o'clock, same bat channel, ILC at the Board of Education. You all are welcome to join us at that time. Thank you so much for coming in. It is truly appreciated. You're always welcome to come back and give us more updates. If you are online or you're watching this as a recording, we've got this awesome information and you need to get some as well. So scan the QR code and stay up to date. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Join us